Ridley, what made you think of Christian to portray Moses?
Cup of tea 5 years ago.
Yes.
We had a cup of tea.
Yeah.
Very English.
No
Biscuits.
woodbine. No woodbines.
No
but,
woodbine.
yeah.
Tea and biscuits. And fundamentally saying, why haven't we worked together before? Let's find something. And typically British, we never talked to each other again for another 5 years. But I received a script from Peter Chernin with Moses. And as I was reading it, it started to click. That's the way my brain was. I'm going, geez, this is Christian. So by the time I get through it, I'm stunned by what I don't know about Moses. But I figured this, I'm going to do it. And the guy that's got to do this is this man. That's how it happened. It's all intuition. There's no science, it's gut. I function on gut.
And Christian, what's the biggest challenge in taking on such an iconic figure?
Just that, you know, that he's so known and he's so personally loved and so important to so many people. And people have very, very strong opinions about exactly how he should be played. And I would talk to many people about that, and they would tell me that. They say, Christian, you have to play him this way. And then I'd speak with somebody else, and they would say something completely different. But I have to play him that way as well. And so you have to realize, all right, that's an enormous pressure, but that's a wonderful kind of a pressure, because it means that it's a vital story, it's a resonant story. And then I get guided by Rid and by Steve Zalian's script, and we forge our own way of portraying this character, who is a far more complex character than I had ever begun to realize.
How so?
The traditional portrayals of him and the sort of Sunday school idea is one which is quite simple, you know? I mean, wonderful achievements, liberator, lawgiver, etc. But the passages that I was unfamiliar with, and I read from beginning to end, were that he fought an awful lot with God. He wrestled with God, literally the definition of Israelite. He didn't want to be his representative. He was living in very violent times. He was very conflicted himself about who he was, who his own identity was. He was an eternally intriguing character, possibly the most I've ever come across.
And Ridley, what triggered your interest in crafting your version of the Exodus?
What's my?
Your version.
Well, my version very much, of course, would be that I looked at the original version and versions of other biblical epics, and they are kind of very exalted and elevated by very great filmmakers and great stars at that particular time. And I wanted to pull it back into the realms of reality, making all the characters real. And I'd once seen the remains of Ramses, so I know he was real. He was not a fantasy, he's absolutely real. Lies in state with his coffin is open. You can see his skin, his bone structure, and his hair. So I know he absolutely existed. So I wanted to come at it from that direction.
And in both of your opinions, what is Moses' defining characteristic?
Oh man, to me, I'm too far in my portrayal. You know, it's like when you can't see the wood for the trees. You know. To define him with one word, because to me his very nature was the fact that he was so complex and he was so very, very human. You know, this was not the other person was talking about superheroes. He's not a two-dimensional character in any way whatsoever. He's very much representing almost every human emotion that you can possibly have. He has that throughout the Torah. So I would find it impossible to find one word, or at least I would have to take much longer than a couple of minutes to figure it out.
And also, you've got a guy who's brought up with status quo. Status quo being you have a slave population that is a free labor for Egypt and all its productivity and its success, and they become status quo. And at what moment, if you're half intelligent and you have any human feelings whatsoever, do you gradually adjust to that idea? Therefore, I think it's his conscience that built up, particularly when it was identified that, in fact, he was Hebrew. Then he went away, and then he had that period where he sat thinking about that. And I've always thought that the idea of the boy Malak could easily be perceived as his conscience on the mountain at that moment, which ignited him to get up and go back to return to Egypt.